Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Paulicki. He's Jacob Alberta. We're a Minnesota sports podcast. So if you're a Minnesota sports fan, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're a Wild fan, tentatively give this video a like because the Wild have been absolutely struggling lately. They've lost 5 of 6, Alberta. They're 4-6-0 in their last 10 games. They've fallen to third in the division, and all of a sudden, all those games we had in hand, we still have a couple in hand with the Blues, but we've kind of wasted that opportunity here after dropping some of these rough games, which, Calgary's a really good team. They were clearly, much faster than us, it appeared the other night. The 2 losses to Winnipeg really kill you because Winnipeg's just not that good of a team. But even like the Florida loss at home, Florida's one of the best teams in the league too. So that's a tough game. But I mean, what do you make of this recent skid by the Wild? Obviously, we just did a video about Cam Talbot struggling and how Kähkönen is probably the number one goalie, but Kähkönen got kind of hung out to dry against the Flames. He was just getting peppered left and right by our non-existent competitive edge in that game. So, I mean, where do you start, I guess, with what's going wrong with this team?
Yeah, I think there's a lot you could point to here. I'm usually not the first one to sound the alarms and really freak out over a losing streak because I think this does happen over the progression of a season. Like outside football, I mean, the rest of the teams you have and the seasons they play, like there's so many games you're bound to hit a streak like this eventually. But at the same time, when we're kind of closing in, making our way through the second half of the season, it's making me a little nervous. Like I think it's kind of time to hit the panic button. I won't say full on like we got to start making like panic trades and all these moves and things. Like obviously I think a trade could help this team. Maybe it'd bring the energy that we need, but we don't need to like do basically accept the first offer, make the first offer, some ridiculous thing like the first chance we have. So gotta pump the brakes a little bit, but I think it's time to hit a soft panic button, I would say. But as far as the first thing that jumps out the page to me is probably just the energy there. Like I get we're playing a lot of games and we all knew this was coming, but at the same time, I don't think we're bringing it. And like you mentioned, the other night against Calgary, Kähkönen was left out to dry. I mean, he didn't have a chance because, like you said, they lacked an edge, and I think that had a lot to do with energy because I think these guys are pretty a tight knit group. But we've also talked about too. It seems like they play a little bit better when they play in front of Talbot defensively, although Talbot lets in more goals, but so that doesn't do us any good. But there's a lot to point to, but that's probably the first thing I'd want to say is that we need to bring more energy, and I think we're getting some well-needed days off here between the Calgary games. And I also understand we're playing a lot of good teams lately, but I have some playoff run aspirations, so I want to see us play better against cream of the crop teams. I realize you're not going to win them all, certainly no, because I mean even in your best ideas, I guess you win a series of 7 games like 4-3 or something. So you probably won a little bit more than 500, and you're going to play teams like Florida, who are they're a machine, quite frankly. But to just get annihilated by them, and then Calgary, and then Toronto, we hung around a little bit more, but they just got the best of us. But I think losses like Ottawa, boy, that grinds my gears even more. That's a game you have to have. I mean, at the time, we were up 24 points on them in the standings. So, like, they're not even in our stratosphere. And for us to lose that game, that's so disappointing. So I think what's critical here coming up is just taking care of games that we should, like games that we're heavily favored in, and then also hopefully splitting games as far as teams that are right around our level as far as in the standings go, or just pure talent them at an eye test level, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that Ottawa loss was extremely infuriating. The 2 Winnipeg road games, granted, it's a division rival, but like
that changes a little bit, but still.
Yeah, Winnipeg's still not very good, and we'd beaten them at home earlier this season a couple times, I believe, and Winnipeg always plays us tough, but it's like you gotta win at least one of those games. I think one game we got shut out. Was that right after the All-Star break or something?
Yep, first one right out of the chute.
So yeah, not good. But yeah, just win the winnable games. I'm kind of with you. Like I don't want to sound the panic alarm quite yet, just because I love this Wild team. They had such a good start to the season, and they really looked legit. And it's just it's a 6-game stretch here. Over the last 10, it hasn't been great overall, but it's just you'd have to think they're going to bounce back at some point. They have a ton of home games here in March that they can really capitalize on. After this Calgary game, they got 2 road games in Philly and in Buffalo. But then you got Dallas at home. You got the Rangers at home. You got a game against the Red Wings, who we just beat, Columbus Blue Jackets, who aren't amazing. Teams like Chicago, Vancouver at home, Columbus at home again. So there's some winnable games mixed in here in March for sure. Colorado will be a tough one, but it's go time, like you said. It's concerning because it's happening at a critical juncture in the season where the Blues are kind of playing well. They've passed us up in the standings. We're not playing well. Teams like the Dallas Stars are all of a sudden kind of climbing back into it when we thought, oh, these guys are old and they're garbage, but here they are. They're only 4 points back of the Wild. Um, that's hockey too. Things get tight and it gets close, especially down the stretch run. But it's like you see how Colorado's just exploded past everybody.
I
They're
know.
at they're at 82 points, which is like at least four more than any other team in the league right now. I mean, they're a machine, so it's kind of hard to see how anybody can get past them regardless. But I mean, for us, like you said, we have playoff run aspirations. At least win a freaking series is kind of our goal for this season because we
That should
took
be the baseline.
we took Vegas to 7 last year, and we're probably gonna have to play the Blues in the first round, assuming we finish in that 2-3 slot.
Hmm.
And we struggle against the Blues, so it's like that's going to be a really tough matchup if that's going to be our first round matchup. And I could definitely see that one going 6-7 games and probably going either way. So does this change your mind at all about having to make a trade? I know we've done videos talking about, do they really need to make a trade? The team's got good chemistry, they're clicking, but all of a sudden you're seeing Dean Evison juggling lines, even though that was short lived in that Calgary game. He quickly went back to his normal lines, putting Hartman back with Kirill and Zuccarello. But do you think this kind of changes anything with the Wild's approach at the trade deadline coming up?
Yeah, I think you gotta for sure lean into it a little bit more. I still don't think we for sure need to make a trade. Like I still think you gotta find the right value. And truthfully, it's gonna come down to how you feel internally about this roster and their ability to overcome adverse situations and bounce back from something like this. Like if you
Yeah,
think this is just a rough skid and it just happens and they'll be fine, just give it another week or two or something, then they'll kind of come out of it, then no, I probably wouldn't push the issue. But if you feel
yep,
like you need some extra source of energy, you need to bring in here a shot in the arm of some sort that you can't get from somebody already on this roster, then they absolutely need to explore this because this is a season I feel like we need to capitalize on because we're getting a lot of career seasons from guys that are really making pennies to the dollar, I guess, as far
yeah,
as contracts go. Like, for instance, the Hartman. When's Hartman ever going to do this again, do you think? Like, it's probably
right.
not happening again. And then you think about, like, Pat Zuccarello just having a second life, really, playing with Kaprizov, just putting together this fantastic season. Like, how many more seasons do you think a guy like Zuccarello has in the tank? So
Yep.
it's like, I feel like you got to take advantage when you have guys on your first two lines like that, just having these huge years. So really, it's going to come down to how you feel about the guys you already have and their ability to basically bounce back and be fine and create their own energy. Otherwise, I think you need to look into a trade probably ASAP.
Yeah, and kind of one of the issues has been like a guy like Hartman has regressed from where he
Yeah,
started this season, which
true.
was bound to happen. Same with like Marcus Foligno. His
Yeah,
offensive production's gone down. You're missing guys like Greenway and Dumba, who are probably two of the most physical players on the team.
yeah,
So, granted, they're not massive difference makers, but having them out certainly makes somewhat of a difference without having that physicality.
yeah. It changes the
So,
mindset a little bit.
yeah, so hopefully they can get those guys back here pretty soon as well. But another thing I've just really noticed is our defensemen are,
Oh,
talking about regression there.
they've been terrible.
Kulikov's really been rough. Jordy Ben especially, like he's been in and out with Kalen Addison, which I
Yep.
don't understand why Addison doesn't just play from now on because
Jordy Ben's gonna go. I don't
it's
want
like
that guy in
every
the rotation.
it's like every now and then Evison wants to sprinkle Jordy Ben in there, and I just don't understand it. John Merrill's made some rough plays too that have led to goals, so it's like the back end of our defense is really struggling, and you're starting to notice that, especially with Dumba being out now. It's like the only two you can like truly rely on are Brodeen and Spurgeon. Goligoski's kind of up and down, and he's an older guy anyways. So the defense I think is very concerning. Offensively, like we're still scoring goals. We're not as consistent as we have been, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm not too worried about the offense, just given the firepower we have, especially on those top two lines. But
Exactly.
yeah, there's a lot of concerning little trends here, but it obviously can all flip in a heartbeat here, and they can get back on a winning track. So,
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
any other final thoughts from you before we take off on the Wild's recent skid and what's to come in the month of March?
Yeah, I guess we're hitting a critical juncture. I mean, you could point to any point in the season, it always feels important in the games you play. But at the same time, right now, when you have a schedule coming up like you rattle off there, where we play a bunch of teams that are definitely worse than us, I think you got to look for them to clean up in those games. Otherwise, it's really time to hit a hard panic button
Yep.
and think about what this team's like future looks like for the rest of the season as far as the playoffs go, because I think we'll get in even if we kind of limp there, which I hope we don't. But
Mhm.
I just don't think the West is deep enough for us to miss the playoffs, even under catastrophic circumstances. But still, you got to think long and hard about what this team's really going to do if we can't beat teams that are like probably 10, 15 points worse than us. So,
Yeah.
man, yeah, again, a critical point in the schedule in the season, and we gotta start stacking some wins again, because the longer this goes on, the more you start to just question everything we're doing here, and more gets in people's heads in that locker room, and that just continues to spiral. I mean, when it rains, it pours.
Exactly. I think they could make a huge statement by coming out and beating Calgary at home,
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
kind of righting the ship from there. Because then you got a couple easier road games, and then you get to bring it back home for most of the month of March and kind of make a push there. So
Exactly. Winning cures everything.
exactly. I mean, they have a 9-game homestand at some point. I think starting March 13th. It looks like against Nashville. So
Yep.
I mean, that's going to be the time to make up some ground. You have a game against Nashville in there. You have games against Colorado, um, Vegas, Chicago, like teams that are in your conference. So obviously Chicago's not very good, but
No,
you'll take them where you can get them. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do in this next month or so, and if they do pursue any trades or not that could potentially make a difference to this team. So,
for sure.
but that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Please hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. And feel free to follow us on both Twitter and Instagram and leave your comments below. Are you sounding the panic alarm on the Minnesota Wild? And what are your thoughts on what they should do going forward here? Should they make a trade? And do you think they can kind of turn it around and make a push here in the month of March with all their home games? So until next time, thanks for watching.